To start this look, I'm working with a medium dark cool toned brown eyeshadow and using my straight brush handle as a bit of a level to line up the center of the spiral with my pupil. Then with a small detail brush and that brown eyeshadow, I'm mapping out pretty much all the details, starting with the eye spirals since they are the focal point of the look. These lines don't need to be perfect or how you want your final lines to come out. This is just giving us a basic outline for the entire look. And it's really nice to use an eyeshadow for this step because it's quite easy to remove if you end up not liking the placement. You do want to be sure to tap your brush off each time you dip back in to help reduce any fallout, especially if you're working over a lighter or more contrasting base. As you go, you can close the eye you're working on to see how things are lining up, or you can close both eyes and snap photos from different angles along the way as well. Creating an imaginary line across to line up the center of the second spiral, then dotting to mark and check the placement. You could also use a softer eye or brow pencil here if you prefer, and you can of course experiment to see which you like more and what's easiest for you to remove if you're not sure. I'm also just doing this over my normal base makeup, but if you do want to go more toward the look from the film, you could apply a lighter or white base first. After finishing the main spirals, I decided to work on the face contouring. I started with my usual contour shade to help get a feel for what I wanted before going in with the darker shade, and I'm using a small face contouring brush to start with. I'm bringing the contour up slightly higher than my natural cheekbone and a little bit further in toward the nose, deepening the shadow at the temples and blending up and around the forehead as well. Then contouring a bit under the chin and up along the jawline. Then to contour the nose, I started by defining along the sides, taking it up toward the brows and a little under and around the sides of the tip of the nose. Now I'm using a smaller fluffy eyeshadow brush and the same brown eyeshadow used for the lines to start gradually deepening and defining the contours that I already laid down. I'm using a very light hand to apply this at first, then building it up especially closest to the edges to create the deepest shadows there. I'm also taking that down onto the contours and down the sides of the neck. I felt like my jaw was standing out a bit too much, so I took mostly the leftover product on my brush and blended that from the cheek to jawline contour so the cheeks appeared a little more sunken in. So this is what we're working with for the contouring so far, and then with the same eyeshadow and detail brush, I added more of an arch to the top of my brow to kind of lift that outer area, and of course use whatever color works with your brows or the look that you're going for. And now I'm continuing on to create the cracking details, again keeping with the same eyeshadow and detail brush. I did sketch up a face chart for this and use the Beldam / Other Mother as inspiration, but this is a very free kind of look, so you can definitely place all the cracks wherever and however you like and what you think looks best for you. I'm using a fairly light, unsteady hand as I'm lining to give kind of a jagged, imperfect look that's thicker in some spots and thinner in others. For the mouth, I'm extending a line out from the corner of my mouth into a slight smile, and I'm adding a few of these little mini curls or spirals here and around the face as well. Again, this is just a basic outline, and you can always wipe away or add more in later as you go. I'm curving the inner part of the brows up for that furrowed look and to give it more of an angry look rather than sad or worried. Like for example in the Weirdo look, you want the arch of the brow to be more intense and taken up higher than the inner curve, if at least just a little bit like I've done here. And if you need to, you can always block out your brows fully or partially to achieve your desired look. Then just continuing with the cracks and curls. The cracks on the nose are fun because you can use these along with shading to really distort the shape of your nose. I wanted mine to look quite thin and a little crooked and pointed. I'm taking this line up onto my bottom lip to give the mouth more of a crooked look as well. I wasn't too worried about the neck since I knew mine would mostly be covered, but you could take as many cracks down onto the neck and shoulders even if you would like to. So now that all the general lines are down, I'm going in with, of course, the NYX Epic Ink liner in black, one of my absolute favorites for detailing, to define and darken all of the cracks, lines, and spirals. This step is pretty self-explanatory, but the main tip I have, whether you're drawing or painting, is to really pay attention to your pressure. Especially when using a black or a high contrasting color, and in my case a waterproof black. It's always better, I think at least, to start with a super light pressure to base out the line or whatever you're working on, and then add more pressure to thicken certain areas as desired. You can of course remove it if you do need to, it's just not as easy in this step. Generally for me, regardless of what I'm applying, starting out lighter and smaller and then building up from there is the way to go for almost anything. You don't have to use a liner or this liner, you could use a body paint and a fine detail brush, a gel liner, brow product, whatever you have that works best. Here I'm extending out these two lines to create a few more cracked pieces. Again, like I did with the eyeshadow, I'm using a wavering, semi-unsteady hand to create the uneven, jagged look. Thicker areas would be more cracked or separated, whereas the thinner lines show less space between the cracked pieces. If you do need to steady your wrist, you can use your non-working hand as an anchor or support for the other. I will be filling in the lips with a lipstick, but I am using the liner to fill in just the corners around the mouth. And here we got a little visitor who just woke up from her nap. This is my new kitty, Lydia, of course named after Lydia Deetz from Beetlejuice. I'm using a black liquid lipstick to fill in the rest of the lips, then finishing up the cracks and onto the eyes. I started with the outer portion of the spirals, then under the eyes, then the lids. I wanted to give the spirals a kind of Tim Burton-esque feel, giving the curves kind of corners or points, so it's not just a perfect spiral. Again, I'm checking the placement from time to time by closing the eye that I'm working on. If your eyes are anything like mine, they'll probably shake and twitch a little bit while you're working on them. Just take breaks, blink it out, but do your best not to blink before your product dries down so it doesn't transfer and make a mess. If it does, take a little makeup remover on a cotton bud, remove what you need to, then recreate your spiral. Just going back in and finishing up with some of my cracks and adding a few more in. And almost inevitably, you'll need to go in and correct some little things, especially near the center of the spiral. So to do that, I'm using my base, which is the Pure 4-in-1 Love Your Selfie Foundation and Concealer on a small flat concealer brush. And I'm just very carefully stamping the tiniest amount of that on where needed and tapping it out gently with my finger. And depending on what base you used or didn't use, you could also sub a makeup remover here as well instead of concealer. I'm also applying this to a portion of my top lashes and lash line to help camouflage them when I close my eyes. Then I applied just a light dusting of colorless powder over top to set that in place. Again, I'm using that same brown eyeshadow from earlier to shade some of the cracked pieces so they appear a little bit recessed or set further back. I'm using a flat shader brush so I can apply the shadow right up to the edges as well as blend out with the leftover product, and I'm switching to a fluffier brush to soften the fade when needed, and again starting out light and building up the shadow as desired. Some I focused closer to the edges, others I shaded in the entire piece, and this is totally up to your preference as well. I did want to use this step to help accentuate some of the contours and thin out the nose more, so any pieces near those areas I darkened a bit more. I also needed to conceal that little section of lower lip I lined across earlier, and then I'm setting that with the powder as well. Then back to the shading, I'm really focusing on the shape of the nose, and I also deepened the contours and shading on the cheeks, temples, and jawline. To finish off, I'm using a white eyeshadow on a smaller flat shader brush to highlight mainly the center areas of the cracked pieces. On the areas of the face that I wanted to stand out more, like the tops of the cheekbones, down the nose and chin, I'm building up the white more so it's even brighter. And that is everything for this look. If you have any questions, let me know down below. I'm wishing you all an incredible 2020. I hope you enjoyed this video and you will definitely be seeing more of me this year, so I will see you in the next one.